Hey humans, how's it going? Susan Ruth here. Thanks for listening to another episode of Hey Human Podcast. On this episode, I sat down with AJ Croce. As many of you know, some of you may not know, he is an extraordinary musician, songwriter, troubadour, and his new record, Just Like Medicine, drops August 11th, 2017. So for those of you listening to this episode the day it comes out, that means tomorrow you can pick up your copy. You can pre-order it already, but if you want to get it right when it's hot off the presses, that would be tomorrow. You can find it at Amazon and iTunes and all the places you get records. It's released on Compass Records. AJ and I chatted about the history of him and his music and his process, his love of words, and the genetics of songs, where songs came from down the line. It was a really cool conversation. He's a good cat. I very much enjoyed it. Check out links, the stuff we talked about, at heyhumanpodcast.com. And if you are a Twitterer and you want to follow me on Twitter, you can do that at Susan Ruthism, which is SUSANRUTHISM. That's on Twitter. And then Facebook and Instagram, you can follow me also at Susan Ruthism if you so desire. But for the Hey Human podcast, that's how you find it. So facebook.com/HeyHumanPodcast, Instagram.com/HeyHumanPodcast. Please check out Hey Human on iTunes if you get a chance, and rate and review it. Super helpful. And there's a donate button at HeyHumanPodcast.com if you feel like giving a little support to the endeavors here. I'm a one-woman show, so feel free to, toss $1 or $5 or whatever. Be awesome. Hope you enjoy AJ, and go get his record, Just Like Medicine. Again, he is an extraordinary talent, and his music is interesting, and it's fun, and it's deep, and it's certainly worth the journey. All right, everyone, here we go. Hi, AJ.
Hi, how are you?
I'm well. How are you?
I'm doing great, thanks.
Thank you for being on Hey Human. I appreciate it.
Oh, I'm glad to be here.
And welcome to my kitchen.
Oh, thank you.
It's very exciting.
Yes.
Well, I wanted to start with talking about, you were so sweet. You brought me your record, 12 Tales, and your wife did the artwork.
She did. She and a gentleman named Darren Graylish collaborated. She did all of the pen and ink and painting.
It's beautiful.
And Darren did the rest of it. It was a real concept of I had produced the last 3 of my albums, and I was really ready to learn something from some great folks. And so I had this idea of doing 45 essentially with 6 different producers and doing 12 songs. They would pick the songs from either me playing in person for them, like I did with Alan Toussaint or with Cowboy Jack Clement.
May he rest
and
in
then,
peace.
Yeah, both.
Oh, did
and
Alan die too? Oh,
yeah, and so we reached out and just tried to see who was available. And then the other facet to it, which was probably the hardest part, besides the logistics of working with all of these amazing producers, was just making sure that we could get into their town, because I worked with them in their studios.
They're all over the place.
Yeah, I worked with them in their studios, or the studios they like to work in, with musicians they like to work with. And except for a few songs where I had the guitar player who I travel with a lot, Michael Bazar. Except for those tracks, it was all whoever those producers wanted to work with.
Yeah,
and it was amazing. So each month, as I was recording that record, I was releasing one song on iTunes and giving a taste of it. But I never wanted the same producer to be the next month, because I wanted to give a totally different flavor each time. So
they're definitely different flavors.
Yeah, so it was really hard. There were a lot of times when I record on Thursday and Friday, mix it on Saturday if it wasn't finished being mixed by Friday night. Sent it to mastering on Monday in LA, which is where it was getting mastered. Wherever I was, the file was getting sent there, and then it was on iTunes on Tuesday.
Oh my goodness.
And so that happened a lot, maybe 4 times, and it was really nerve-wracking because I wanted to make sure I didn't miss any month. So it was right down to the wire a couple times.
Yeah. Yeah, I understand that because this podcast comes out every Thursday, and I think usually by Wednesday night I'm like, oh my god!
Yeah.
Let me pour you some coffee.
Thank you so much.
French press pour vous, monsieur.
It's my favorite.
Yay.
Thank you.
So when I listened to this record, which I've done many times since Jeff sent it, so Right on Time and The Time Is Up were my 2 favorite songs because I'm sort of hippy dippy and I love this the feel
bookend.
It's funny because I don't look at the title when I'm listening through the first time.
Good.
And then I went back and I was like, well, those were my 2 favorites. And I went and looked. I was like, oh, it's so funny that they both involve time because for me, time is so fluid and all that stuff. But there was a line I wrote down in the first one. Faith can only take you just so far. You got to find out who you are, and that's from Right on Time. And I loved that line so much. Oh, that's a tattoo-worthy line. I loved it. And I wanted to ask you, like, do you truly believe that? Was that something you had to go through? And
yes,
experience?
Of course. I actually. That song was pretty interesting, and it's funny you mentioned that exact line. I got a message from Paul Williams, the writer and actor, head of ASCAP, and he wrote to me with that exact line. Faith will take you just so far. You got to find out who you are, and then and the following response to it. And what happened? That was a really interesting song. It was written in 3 different cities. I had an apartment in Amsterdam while I was touring, which I do pretty regularly. If I'm in Europe and I'm touring, I'll rent an apartment if it's not a big group, and we'll just have a home base.
Yeah.
And so we'll drive a couple hours at the most, maybe a few hours, and then drive home afterwards. Yeah. And wake up and make our own coffee and do our own thing, and then we don't need to leave until then. Anyway, so I was in Amsterdam, and across the street from the apartment was this big church, and the bell didn't stop ringing on the hour. And so, like, when we got there, when we landed, and we got into this place, and we walked. I heard it and I'm like, oh, we're in Europe. It's quaint. The second hour, it's so great to be here. I'm glad to be here. By like 3 a.m, you're pulling your hair out going, what the? Yeah. So the next morning, red-eyed, I sat in, there's this small little sort of garden in the back, and wrote all the lyrics to the verses. Mm-hmm. And then I came home to Nashville and I wrote the chorus to the song, and then I left Nashville and moved back to California. I was in San Diego, and and I finished the bridge in San Diego, and so it was a song of 3 cities.
Yeah, I love that too because you're in a different time, a different place, and because of what that song is about.
And each one is very much sort of in keeping with the place. So the verses really do kind of suit that that place, and it was kind of because of the way that I wrote them. And then the chorus is really about Nashville, about all these people who come here with the hope of being able to be a musician, with the hope to be able to be a writer, with the hope to be a performer. And that's what the chorus sings about, you know. And then the bridge is this kind of Beach Boys inspired kind of
I love that.
harmony thing. And so anyway, there's that.
Do you think finding out who I mean, obviously you're the son of a very famous musician, And so I think anytime a kid grows up with that, even though your father passed away when you were so young, when anytime anybody grows up in with that sort of specter in the room of what the father or the mother does for a living, because your mom was also an artist, is that sort of make you go, oh, shoot? Like if they were doctors, you'd be like, I better go to Harvard and then go get my medical degree, because who you are thing is interesting.
As far as my father was a good musician. He was a really great writer, and I dedicated myself from the time I was a kid to being as great a piano player as I could be. I came to guitar later in my 30s, but I was, to me, I saw what fame did, and I saw how it affected people, and I saw how, you could go into a store and someone would be a complete jerk to you, and then they might, see your name on a check or a credit card or something, and then everything changes, and you're repulsed by this behavior. It's disgusting. It's really gross. Yeah. And so fame was never my thing. I just wanted to be as good as I could be at what I did.
I think you can tell that in your music.
And so I really probably messed up as far as that goes, because there's for so long it was kind of a high wire act of, I don't want to do that, because if I do that I might have too much success, and if I turned down opportunities, especially early in my career, that would have made me, possibly wealthy, possibly famous, possibly any of these things. Yeah. And I don't regret that, because I really did what I thought was right. And now if I want to play one of his songs, or maybe 4 times a year, I'll do 2 generations of our music and play that stuff. It's really out of joy and out of love for it, and it's not out of trying to make anything, Well,
I think a lot of times people confuse happiness with fame and money, when in reality most of the famous people I know and the super wealthy people I know are not very happy.
Yeah.
It's that weird myth we're fed.
I had a great meeting. I was just told this story recently to a friend of mine who was managed by this sort of well-known manager. I think he started here and moved to LA and was really very, very successful. And he had some legendary country artists, and I met with him after my first manager, and I was kind of looking to find someone that was going to take me to another place, and it was just, who had experience and all of that stuff. And one of the things he asked me was, besides music, what are the 3 things that you want out of life? And it really, that question, as simple as it is, and I've told this story many times, it really affected how I pursued music and what I wanted out of it. And because what he told me was, I've got a client who is in his 50s, incredibly successful, has more money than he knows what to do with, and he goes home and it's an empty house. And it's a big empty house. And he's like, so you can put all your time and effort into your career if that's what is important to you, and that could be you, or you might have other interests.
Yeah.
And so that really put a perspective to all of the things that we were talking about. What do you want?
Yeah. Well, I think especially because I'm a musician, I'm a writer and a performer and stuff, and so for me, especially lyric is so important, and I really zone in on that. What struck me the most when I heard 12 Tales is that it's clear you're a real musician. It's clear that a lot of things move you and that you feel everything. Because I think a lot of musicians think they have to just do this one thing because they're not playing for what's in their heart. They're playing for what they think people want to hear. Right? And so you go through this record, for example, and there's a little R&B, there's a little poppy sounds, there's a little jazz, there's like kind of little Beatlesque moments, you know, like all this stuff. And I find it so cool that you don't play to a piper, you play to you, when so many artists get even vilified if they step outside, like from album to album.
Well, I found that early on, 25 years ago. My first deal with Private Music and with BMG was, my first album was, put in the jazz category. And, I was really dismayed by it at the time, because that was just an aspect of what I had been doing, but it wasn't my dream to be a jazz piano player, jazz singer, or anything. Sure. I love jazz, but that's not what I was. That's not, something I'm, I can play a facet of it well. I can't play all of it well. And it's something that takes dedication every day in a way that I was more interested in pursuing all of these different kinds of music and learning Latin music and learning, different kinds of soul and R&B and early blues and stride, and wanted to play, rock and roll, and wanted to do all these different things. And that jazz label really stuck with me for a while. And so my next album, after the first one, was called "That's Me in the Bar," and it's really an album of drinking songs, and it's more a lot less jazzy, and there's country influences, and it's still rootsy, definitely a rootsy album, but it's a total departure, know. And then the next one, same thing. It was like, I'm going to Memphis and I'm recording this thing that has this elements of all of this Memphis stuff, but there's hints of New Orleans, and there's influence of the Stones, and influences of the Faces, and influence of all these things that were like also in my life, and I felt at that time I really had to explain to critics, to journalists, and in general, and say, if you are capable of doing something, you should do it. Because I played with other people as a sideman, as a, just recording for other folks as a piano player. And I wasn't hemmed in as a sideman. I wasn't hemmed in the studio. I did what they asked me. And if it was a country thing, it was a country thing. If it was a southern rock thing, that's what it was. If it was a jazz thing, that's what it was. If it was a blues, whatever it was, pop thing, I was here playing, on these Korean or Japanese pop albums where, I had to sit on my left hand because I was using two fingers on most of this stuff. Yeah, so it was really, that was a totally different thing. But, I was really aware of that, and I said, I think I said it a bunch in early interviews, that actors were praised for the diversity of roles that they could take on and be convincing in, whereas with very few exceptions, musicians were considered unfocused and
makes me crazy.
And I think as long as it's good, it doesn't really matter what it is.
I so agree with you. Absolutely. So, how's the coffee, by the way?
It's good.
Oh, it is?
Yeah.
Okay. Good. I wasn't sure if the coconut was going to ruin everything.
It didn't. It didn't.
I'm glad.
No.
Yay. So, new record.
Yes.
Just Like Medicine. Just Like
Medicine. I've just finished it. Recorded it with Dan Penn, who's a great, legendary writer out of Alabama. He's produced a bunch of stuff, and if you're not familiar with his name, he was sort of part of Muscle Shoals, not sort of, was a staff writer down there. He wrote James and Bobby Purified, First Hit, I'm Your Puppet. He wrote Dark End of the Street. He wrote Do Right Woman for Aretha.
Whoa.
He wrote The Letter for the Box Tops. Wow. He wrote Sweet Inspiration for the Sweet Inspirations. He wrote just a ton of stuff that we sing and love and know. And I saw him perform and went up to him and said, "Hey, you want to write a song?" And this was about a year and a half ago. And he said, sure. And so we wrote a song, and we recorded it at his place, in his studio, and it sounded really good. And I was like, this sounds great. I'm like, I said, can I record another song and just see how it sounds? And I recorded another one, just solo, piano and vocal. It sounded really, really good. Just the tonality of the space. And so I said, you want to make a record? And he said, sure. And so we started with those two songs. Mm-hmm. And we brought, and it was an amazing band. It was David Hood was the bass player from Muscle Shoals, Brian Owings from Mississippi, but did a lot of Muscle Shoals stuff on drums, and he's now out with Tony Joe White and with Iris DeMint. Mm. And then Colin Linden played guitar. And so we were the core group. Mm-hmm. Me playing piano and organ and Wurlitzer. We were the core group, and then we had the Muscle Shoals horns on about half the record, and then we had
I love horns so much.
The McCrary sisters on about half the record, and Steve Cropper came in and played guitar on a song, and Vince Gill came in and played guitar on a song, and it was a thrill. I mean, it was a really hard project in the sense. I should probably say that I had a real concept with this album too, which is that I was sort of aware that the way most people listen to music is on their phones, on their laptops, with their earbuds, mostly kind of crappy listening devices, and they're listening to MP3s, and
which for people that don't know, that it takes away much of the quality.
Right. So my solution to that was to record a mono record, which was going to be rounder, and it was going to be perfect for a transistor radio. And so I had this idea that if we record this, it's going to sound good on your iPhone, on your iPod. It's going to sound good out of your computer speakers, because it's just gonna. It's like you listen to a mono recording on one little speaker, and it's going to sound better than a stereo recording. And so that was a real important factor in doing this. And it wasn't to be cool. It wasn't to do something like that. But it worked perfect because Dan's setup is 16-track 2-inch. And that's what we recorded on, 16-track 2-inch. And most of the gear was really old.
That means tape, not digital, for all those of you listening.
So we didn't record digitally on this project. It was all the tape, which means that you can't go fix something with ease. In fact, his machine was so old, the tape machine, that even punching in was hard. So we had to play it through all the way right. Even in the few cases where one of the musicians wanted to fix something, they had to fix the whole pass. And so that part of it was, I hadn't done that since my first album. And my first two albums were done, 24-track tape, but I hadn't ever been limited like this before. When we started off, I thought, okay, we kind of both, Dan and I both approached it like it was a modern recording, in that we had a lot of mics and we ran out of tracks immediately. And we're like, well, where do we put the vocals and where do we put the horns? And I came back to him after that, and we sat down in the studio and talked, and I said, I want to feel like 16 tracks, like the old days. I was like, what do you do with 16 tracks, because, and he said, I totally understand. He said, when I recorded the Box Tops in whatever, 67, he said we had 3 tracks, and it was one track for vocals, one track for the band, and one track for horns and strings. And so it was with that idea that we approach the rest of the album.
I can't wait to hear it. Do you have a favorite track on there? That's the dumbest question ever, but it's kind of fun to ask.
There's a bunch of things that are really, that really stick in my head. It's pretty diverse, like all my records. It goes in a lot of directions, but it's really a soul album. It's very soulful. And I don't mean that from like it's Sam and Dave or Otis Redding or something, although there's things that hint to that in some places. It's just that in picking the songs, I was thinking of things that were really from the heart, which is what soul music is.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. How many tracks?
10.
10 tracks,
yeah.
Okay. And it comes out when?
Well, it's going to kind of be staggered because of the way I tour. So it looks like it'll come out in Asia in July when I start touring in Japan. It'll be in Europe in August when I'm touring there. And then it'll be in the U.S. either in late August or early September when I start touring in the U.S.
So exciting.
Yeah.
I'm so excited. It's going to be great. So is music your sole being as far as your creative outlet? Do you do other stuff too?
Yeah, I mean, as far as creativity, that pretty much takes up all of the space that I have. As a writer, I play a lot of different instruments. So for me, I started everything else after piano much later in life. But once I started playing guitar and started, playing fingerstyle and playing all these, attacking more complicated pieces of music, I went, well, why not play banjo? If I'm doing this fingerstyle stuff, why not try mandolin? Why not play bass, which I love, I just by the sheer number of years and hours that I played the piano, it's unlikely that I'll ever catch up to where I'm at as a piano player on guitar or any of these other instruments. But certainly I can perform live and perform my own music and or perform a set, song of any sort with confidence. I don't have the same ability to improvise on those instruments as I do on the piano, which just comes. It's like second nature, which is why I got away from playing. Why I wanted to learn new instruments was because I see all of these options, and I wanted to take away some of those options and see if I could still write a decent song.
Yeah. Well, I'm curious, since you're starting out your tour in Asia, will you pick up any foreign instruments just to throw them into your tours? Every once in a while, just pick something up and just go for it, or?
Well, first, I don't know. The first song on this album we did it in one take. We did it in the first take. It was a little bit scary for me to do because I had it in my head for a couple years. And the first version I recorded was just in the kitchen with my iPhone and a box. And it was just this kind of rhythmic groove that was mostly driven by the drum sound of the box I was playing. So it was kind of this, voodoo, kind of West African, a little bit of New Orleans inspired, but then the bridge comes and it's this, kind of or B section, and it's this kind of pop, rock and roll bridge. And so, in explaining it to the band, I was like, "Here's what I'm looking for. Here's how many times the verse repeats and the A section repeats in the first part, and it's all mathematical in the sense that it's you have." The verse repeats 3 times in the first section, 2 times in the second section, 1 time in the third section, and then it ends. And with the B section in between the first and second sections, second and third section. And it was, they got it right away. And so I was sitting at the piano, like I'm sitting here at the table, and I had a drum pressed against the front of the piano and my stomach, and I was playing it, and I was recording into like a big Neumann U87 mic, and I was singing. So we all started playing, and I'm playing hand drum and I'm singing, and the band is playing, and then I have to like play the piano part, and I'm playing that. So with that song, there was no way to fix the drum without messing up the vocal. There was no way to fix the vocal without messing up the drum, and then both of those things are picking up the piano.
That's so stressful.
And so it wasn't so stressful. No, because I didn't feel the stress of it. It was just like, I better play this right.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Well, I didn't feel like, I'm going to totally mess this up. I didn't feel that. I just wanted to play it right, you know?
Right, yeah.
And when we got it, we were like, okay, I think we got it, you know? And I went back with Brian, and Brian and I played one more pass of percussion, and we added background vocals, and that was it.
Yeah.
So we all, we got it done in relatively few tracks. It's really amazing how that happened.
So cool. So as a performing artist, writer person who clearly knows his way around instruments and all that already, I think, sets you apart from a lot of people just in this day and age of music. Do you have, if somebody listening, and you follow your own drum, you're like, you know what, I do play all this kind of stuff, and I love it, and that's who I am, and that's okay.
Right.
For people that are listening that are maybe, any good advice to the up-and-coming kids?
I think challenge yourself to listen to as many kinds of music. The harder the music, the more challenging that the music is that you're listening to, the better you become. If all you listen to is the Ramones, I love the Ramones, but they do one thing, and they do it well, but they do one thing. And I feel that way about a lot of bands, They're great at being the Ramones. That's who they are, And there's a lot of bands that are great at being themselves, and that's it. They do one thing. And they make a great career out of it. But to me, that's boring. To me, I would be crazy if I had to play the same kind of music, the same songs, because it's not in me to do that. I want to push myself to try something else. I want to try Ethiopian grooves. I want to try Nigerian stuff. I want to try Brazilian music. I want to play Argentinian stuff. I want to learn how to play the tangos correctly. I want to play all kinds of music from all over the world, and I want to be able to play it proficiently. So I started by, of course, listening to the stuff that was on the radio, like Beatles and Stones and Yellow and Bowie and the things that were on the radio when I was a kid, Rod Stewart, Elton John, just playing along to those things that were really popular in the 70s, and I played along with my transistor radio. And then, I had lost my sight when I was a kid, and I got turned on to Ray Charles, and that was really life-changing. Stevie Wonder, Ray Charles, turn the kid that can't see onto these guys, and it totally changed everything. Hearing Ray Charles, hearing the blues scale as interpreted by Ray Charles instead of Stones or Bowie or the Beatles or Chuck Berry or Fats Domino. It was this more sophisticated understanding, and from that I went to, same thing with Stevie Wonder, from that I went further back because I wanted to know where those roots came from, and I went back to ended up at stride piano. stuff like James P. Johnson, Willie the Lion Smith. I wanted to play like the early Ellington stuff. Fats Waller was a huge influence, but those things were hard to learn. They were hard to play. The left hand stuff, you're reaching 13ths. I can't reach a 13th naturally. I have to roll the chords. That is to say, I don't play it at the same time, but by playing the 1 and then the 1 and the 13 and the 5, for any of the musicians out there, you start playing stride. It's a repeat, section. And I learned that kind of by oddly enough, by listening to great guitar players like Lonnie Johnson, who, if you try and play that on guitar, good luck. I'll see you in a year, maybe you have a song. Mississippi John Hurt, and that's really simplified the stride for me. A Little Brother Montgomery, who was a piano player, and it was much more. He was a blues player, but he used stride, and it was very simplified. It was very raw compared to how slick and fast and proficient, say, Fats Waller was, or later pianists like Art Tatum or something. And so I wanted to play that stuff. And of course, in the process, I learned the blues stuff, and I learned the boogie stuff, and I learned the stride, some of the jazz and the swing stuff that came later. And meanwhile, of course, I was listening to rock and roll. I was listening to the Clash. I was listening to the Kinks, who were one of my favorites. And I was listening to all this 60s rock and roll. I was really part of this 60s mod scene in Southern California in the early 80s, and that was like
that was some fun music.
That was really fun as a fashion statement, but musically I wanted to go outside the box from the beginning, and that old jazz stuff and all of those other things, they just didn't fit into that sort of power pop rock and roll culture. And so when I was 15 or 16, I was playing a show, and a guy named Floyd Dixon came in, who is a famous blues pianist. He was a songwriter. He wrote a bunch of drinking songs that Hey Bartender, Wine, Wine, Wine. He wrote One Scotch, One Bourbon, One Beer. He wrote a lot of those sort of songs in the 40s and early 50s, and was part of the Central Avenue scene in Los Angeles. And he took me under his wing when I was 15 or 16, and we did a lot of shows where we played four-handed boogies to end the show, and then I was playing a concert, and B.B. King heard me, and I was about 18. I'm just making a short, bio about it. Yeah. And he asked if I wanted to go on the road. He's like, you've got a great left hand. I want to go out on the road. And I said, sure. And so I didn't think it was legit. I didn't think it was real, And a few weeks later, I got a call to go out, and I opened, and I played with him. And I toured on the bus with him.
You're 18. I mean, yeah. I'm just listening to you. You're like, oh, I was 16, and then I'm thinking, God, I'm just a kid.
I was just a kid.
What an experience!
I know a lot of musicians. The musicians I know who do it for a living, who are session guys, who are sidemen, who've done it all their lives, have very similar stories because they kind of knew. I knew from the time I was 12, like, if I practice, I can be good at this. Like, I understood the basic idea. I'm like, but if I practice, I can get good. And and I can make a living doing this, even if it's just playing at a bar or playing at someone's party or doing whatever. I can make a living at this. So, of course, I had to learn the standards. I had, tons of fake books, had to play 4 or 5 hours a night in piano bars. I did that as a teenager, and then I was also part of bands, rock bands, jazz groups, all, R&B stuff, and all of it teaches you something. Still, everyone I play with teaches me something. And as long as you sort of keep your ears open and you're willing to learn something, you're gonna.
Yeah, I agree with that. And be an archaeologist, like you were saying. Go back, dig through your ancestors, dig through their ancestors.
Yeah, the liner notes are really important. I felt like with this album I just recorded, because of the nature of it, I felt like liner notes are really key to this. It's an art that's been lost for many years. I think maybe since the 70s, with a handful of exceptions, and of course some great reissues with excellent liner notes. That being reissues of all genres have had great liner notes. But as far as new artists, new releases with liner notes, they just don't tell you about where stuff came from the way they used to. It used to be really good writers, respected writers, that would give you a hint into where this artist came from, where the roots were, and you'd go, "Oh, I got to hear that." You'd see the liner notes on a Bob Dylan album, and you'd see the title of a song, and you'd want to make sure that you heard Blind Willie McTell. But for me, through the excavation, I found Blind Willie McTell before I found Bob Dylan.
Interesting.
Of course, I knew Bob Dylan songs, but I wasn't like a Bob Dylan fan.
Sure.
I was a fan of the stuff that he was a fan of. I think more than anything.
And it's true too. I think with words, a lot of the young writers that I write with, I say, go and read books, read poetry, read interviews with your favorite people, find out who inspired them. But words are, for me at least, words are so important.
They're incredibly important. Most important words are the smallest. The pronouns are oftentimes, and personal pronouns are what separate the great writers. Of course, finding interesting rhymes and creative rhymes is excellent, but oftentimes simplicity wins over. So you're swimming in the same pool as a lot of other people with the rhyme that you have, especially if you want a one-syllable rhyme. There's only so many with whatever the word you start with is. And so if you're willing to experiment with pronouns and personal pronouns, you find a way to turn it on its head, to make the most out of those short words. Mm-hmm. And when I was in ninth grade, I was in the jazz band in high school, and then I the second class of my day was with a guy named Francis Thumb. And Francis, first day I came in, said, "Play me something." I played something. He said, "Go in that room and practice. I don't want to see you in the class. I just want you to go as a side room with an upright piano. All I want is for you to go in there for the 50 minutes of this class and go practice." And then on Fridays, Francis had been part of the Harry Partch ensemble and was a really interesting dude. Had studied with great classical teachers and had written a bunch with Tom Waits, written a number of plays with him, music, and he could have easily made a living as a composer or playwright or any number of things, but loved teaching kids. And so on Fridays, he would take me, when he could, to the library. He'd get me a cup of coffee. And I'm just like, 14, something like that, And I thought it was great. It was really one-on-one. And he would just, basically take 15 minutes out of the class every once in a while and go, if you want to be a great writer, you need to read Pablo Neruda. You need to read, you need to read Rimbaud. You got to read Voltaire. You got to read. It would just go on and on. You have to read this Dylan Thomas thing. You have to read this E. Cummings thing. You have to read this. You have to read that. You got to read the Ogden Nash. You've got to, there was like no end to what you had to read to like get a different perspective from the word side of things. So while I practiced 5 or 6 hours a day, even more at some points on the piano, I was also reading a ton, and I was really absorbing all of that poetry and trying to assimilate it, trying to understand it. What makes it interesting? What makes it unique? What makes it great?
I love this teacher you're talking about. Oh my gosh!
And I was really fortunate. I only had him for part of the year before I left the school, but he made a huge influence, and we've remained friends over the years.
It's wonderful. Oh, I love it. I'm so excited to get your record. How many albums have you made? I went on the Googles.
Yeah, this will be 10.
Yeah, you have a lot.
Yeah, this will be the one that's coming out will be number 10.
And you only made one with your full name?
Well, it was kind of a funny thing because my first album was called AJ Croce, and my initials I just sort of was given them in like first or second grade, and that just became became my name.
The nickname years.
Yeah, and but the first question out of every journalist all over the world was, well, what does the AJ stand for? And so on my 5th album, I decided to just call it Adrian James Croce, which is my full name, and I was really surprised the number of people that thought that I had changed my name.
Really?
Yeah.
That's hilarious.
Yeah. So, no, but that's my full name.
That's more of a poppy kind of record, right?
It is.
It's more streamlined.
I've been really lucky to sort of have been under the radar in a sense, and still have had chart success, with about 17 or 18 songs and on the radio, but that one really, that one was the first time where, I had a song that was like really, not AAA, not college, not blues, not jazz, it was just straight up on the pop radio. It was on, I was sandwiched between, Ludacris and Fabulous for like 13 weeks. And it's funny because, that's a song I wrote with my friend Steve Poltz, and we just...
I love Steve Poltz!
And we've had success with a few of our songs, but we just... Neither of us play the ones we have success with.
That is so funny. That's hilarious. I love it. So, okay, you said August. Is there a definitive August date for the American release of Just Like Medicine?
It's been going back and forth in the last week.
That.
So,
yeah, okay.
it's,
right.
I've heard a couple different things. I hate to tell you, but if you go to my Facebook band page, I'll have info in the next couple weeks.
And as always, you guys, I'll put links on the website so that you can find things. And this will come out, when I spoke with your manager, we talked about having this episode come out right before.
Okay, great.
Even though we're recording in February.
Yeah.
So, yeah. AJ, you're the bestest. I'm so excited. Just Like Medicine comes out in August. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
It's been fun.